The nation was shocked to learn that the federal government sponsored radiation experiments on human subjects without their consent.
The United States government actually did carry out on our citizens experiments involving radiation.
The Fernald School and others like it were part of a popular American movement in the early 20th century. It was called the eugenics movement. The idea was to separate people considered to be genetically inferior from the rest of society to prevent them from reproducing. Eugenics is usually associated with Nazi Germany, but in fact, it started here in America. Not only that, it continued here long after Hitler's Germany was in ruins. At the height of the movement in the 1920s and 30s, exhibits were set up at fairs to teach people about eugenics. It was good for America, good for the human race. That was the message.
What you are about to watch was when the nation first heard of the experiments run by MIT and Harvard at a state-run institution for disabled children. They fed these children radiation with the help of Quaker oats to give us most of the research we use today regarding the effects of radiation exposure. Don't let this get lost. From 1946 until 1956, researchers gave hundreds of children the radiation equivalent of at least 50 chest x-rays in one single bowl of oatmeal, all from this school that seems to have been forgotten.
In Senate hearings in 1994, it came out that scientists from MIT had been giving radioactive oatmeal to the boys, men now, in a nutrition study for Quaker oats.
We were never told anything.
All they knew is that they'd been asked to join a science club. One of those who attended the hearing was Joe Almeida, a member of the club. He says the boys were recruited with special treats.
We were getting special treatment, extra dessert. We got to eat away from the other boys. We were getting extra oatmeal, getting extra milk.
They forgot to mention the milk was radioactive.
The children did most of the manual labor at the school. What kind of work did they do?
The kids at Fernald raised the vegetables that they ate. They sewed the soles on the shoes that they wore. They manufactured the brooms that they used to sweep the floor.
He says the school made sure at least 30% of the kids admitted had normal or near normal intelligence. The school needed those kids to work.
You had to have somebody with a certain level of intelligence in order to run this place.
Joe Almeida had an unusual job, and the fruits of his labor are still there 50 years later.
My job was to cut these up.
What he cut up were the brains of severely retarded people who had died at Fernald. He cut them into thin slices so they could be studied by scientists. Nothing ever came of the research, but the bits of brains are still there.
They're still sitting here years later. I mean, what was it all for?
Worse than the work, he says, was the abuse he suffered from the attendants who staffed the place.
They had what they call Red Cherry Day. Okay? What Red Cherry Day was, they'd sit us all in a circle and they'd call you up alphabetically. And lucky me, my name is what? Almeida. You'd get up in front of all these kids and you'd pull down your pants and you'd pull down your underpants. They'd make you turn around and they'd whack your ass with this branch until it was red like a cherry.
Few of the attendants showed any kindness, he says, but some of them should have been institutionalized themselves.
This Mr. Rozier used to have 3 or 4 kids urinate in a bucket, and she'd have them float in your face. I mean, these people were sick.
Thousands of government-sponsored experiments did take place at hospitals, universities, and military bases around our nation. The goal was to understand the effects of radiation exposure on the human body. While most of the tests were ethical by any standards, some were unethical, not only by today's standards, but by the standards of the time in which they were conducted. They failed both the test of our national values and the test of humanity. In one scientist injected plutonium into 18 patients without their knowledge. In another, doctors exposed indigent cancer patients to excessive doses of radiation, a treatment from which it is virtually impossible that they could ever benefit. The report also demonstrates that these and other experiments were carried out on precisely those citizens who count most on the government for its help, the destitute and the gravely ill. But the dispossessed were not alone. Members of the military, precisely those on whom we and our government count most, They were also test subjects.